Welcome back. It's been a while. Today's video is going to be something that most people overlook and don't necessarily understand because of manufacturer warranties. Today we're going to be talking about exhaust wrap or header wrap. An example I have for you here today would be something like this, a tubular header. You'll notice this has a darker color to it because most of the wraps out there made of the Kevlar material can actually be painted. So this would be the virgin color of the wrap. It is fairly cheap. You can pick it up at pretty much any automobile parts supplier, catalog, so on and so forth. Now, what I've been noticing on social media, every time somebody asks whether or not you can utilize the header or exhaust wrap, the header or manifold warranty will be voided out. Now, recently on another Facebook page, somebody said that they had already had some jet hot coating or ceramic coated headers that if they wrap the exhaust manifolds or headers, would it void the warranty? It probably will from the manufacturer. So today what we're going to do is we're going to break down what the actual coatings and wraps within exhaust manifolds or exhaust tubular headers, how it affects things, because some of the public are being misguided. So let's just get down to the nitty gritty. Now, the purpose of a header wrap basically has two purposes. One of them is not going to be very evident when it comes to power production. The other reason for header wrap is to save you from being burnt. Okay, so the performance gain from exhaust manifold or header wrap causes the interior exhaust gases to travel a little bit faster as the temperatures increase. And depending on the material of the header itself or the length, the heat is going to be absorbed differently within the material. So many of you that are turning to the car show scene, that when you lift the hood, you want to see more of an immaculate, shiny type exhaust system. You can get ceramic coated or chromed exhaust manifolds or headers. That does not necessarily mean that they are a performance upgrade where you're going to gain noticeable power out of your exhaust system. At the same time, those headers or exhaust manifolds, if they receive the wrapping, they are not going to give a very noticeable power increase. Okay, with multiple dyno sessions, with wrapped or ceramic coated or bare metal headers, there isn't very much of a difference between the tests. Small amounts could be determined by the ambient air within the dyno room, or how hot the engine oil is, or the actual coolant temperature of the engine being tested. Where header wrap comes in is when you have a confined space, or if you're a Harley guy, realizing the heat that's being emitted from your exhaust pipes can work its way into your leather chaps or into your jeans to the point where it's going to burn you over a certain amount of time. It gets extremely hot. By wrapping it, it's helping to retain the heat inside of the actual exhaust tubing and allow it to move towards the exit point. Where the manufacturers are concerned with this is that when you hold the heat inside of the actual material of the exhaust system, the metal itself is going to run hotter. It's going to be expanding at different rates. It's going to start glowing that cherry red, even with a coating. So, what I have drawn up here today is just basically the side sectional view of a pipe. Okay, these are the actual metal material, whether it be exhaust manifold, cast iron manifold to a tubular header. The castings can get extremely hot. They're going to move the exhaust towards the exit point. the efficiency of the exhaust isn't necessarily going to be increased with adding any additional wrapping. Most of it is going to be there for a confined space if you're trying to change out spark plugs, or you're on that Harley Davidson to where your leg is right next to the exhaust system. That's where header wrap is going to come into play, not necessarily within performance out of the engine. It's the performance and the comfortable situation for working on it. Now, there's basically three types of header wrap. There's the Kevlar, which is basically this form right here. Like I said, it'll look, let me tear this piece of tape off here so you guys can see a little bit clearer. Okay, that's gonna be your Kevlar wrap. Now, Kevlar wraps will normally come in that skin colored tan type finish, and it will start to fade to a white, just an off white, basically the same color as like a baseball. The Kevlar will accept paint. So if you want to add additional color underneath your hood to match the car or so on and so forth, you can actually paint the Kevlar wrap, and it will withstand within the fibers of the material. Where if you take a standard metal exhaust system and paint it, the heat will burn it off. So if for you car show guys that would like to have that coloration underneath the hood, you can get the Kevlar variation, wrap it, and paint it whatever color you want. Then there's also the volcanic, let's just call it that. It's a combination of carbon fiber and other materials. Now, because it's carbon fiber, it will not accept paint, so you can't color it. It's going to come in that gunmetal gray, almost to a black tint. After it's gone through a couple of different heat cycles, it will lighten up in color, but it's going to remain in that darker black type coloration. Now, the disadvantage to the Kevlar is that if you have an oil leak or you spill a little bit of oil when you're starting to fill the engine onto the header wrap, it eventually will be exposed to the heat of the exhaust system, and it can cause and catch fire. With the Kevlar, it soaks in and it will stain the actual material. The carbon fiber actually has a natural resistance to oil, so it will stay on the surface of the actual wrap to the point where if you wash it or if you ignite the oil and let it burn off, it's going to evaporate. The Kevlar will soak it in, and it'll take a lot longer. Now, both the Kevlar and the volcanic variation, they're very high heat temp resistant. They themselves are flame resistant, but if you get chemicals, whatever you might be putting in your engine, can cause a fire. Now, if you're working in a confined space, for example, if you're a Ford lover, utilizing or working on a vehicle that has the strut front suspension type things, you realize that the clearance between the strut wall body mounts to the actual exhaust system is very cramped. Every manufacturer, no matter what kind of chassis they come in, the exhaust is normally routed in a very confined space or with a very little clearance within the body of the car. Another place where any kind of wrap is going to be installed is to protect other components, such as steering components, electrical wiring to the actual starter itself. That will release the amount of radiant heat from the exhaust system into that component. If an entire exhaust system is wrapped like this, you realize that from the primary tubing normally hugs the side of the engine block. By wrapping the exhaust system, you're not really realizing the horsepower gain because of the faster flowing hotter exhaust gases. It's because less radiant heat is actually making it into the engine by the radiant from the exhaust into the engine. That's where your power gain is actually coming from. So if you're running at 210 degrees in a race car, you wrap the headers, you might reduce it down to 195 degrees, allowing the components of the engine to work more efficiently, and the oil and coolants to work more efficiently to create the more power. It's not necessarily for the exhaust gases by moving faster. Okay. I forgot to mention the third style of wrap that's available out there is more of your blanketed type wrap. It's not going to be a thin woven material, whether it's made out of Kevlar or the carbon fiber. It's actually going to be a insulation wrap. So it's going to have a chrome front and back to it, almost like aluminum foil, with heat resistant materials sandwiched in between, and you can create that blanket. Most of your turbo type systems or actual individual starter blankets, as they're called, will help reduce the amount of heat that's absorbed through the radiation. The blanket cannot be painted. Okay, as the heat goes, and most of your paints will not adhere to the material. It's actual aluminum. The Kevlar can be painted to whatever color you desire. The volcanic, once again, will not accept paint, and it will become that lighter gray as it goes through the heat cycles. Now, for those of you actually looking for performance increase with your exhaust system, especially within your exhaust manifolds or primary header systems, the coatings actually have a bigger impact to performance than the wraps do. They can be used in conjunction. Now, the manufacturers of the actual headers are going to avoid any kind of warranty they have. Okay, no matter what you do to them, whether it's an aftermarket spray-on ceramic coating to the outside of the header to ones that actually coat the inside. Once you apply any kind of product or wrap to the manufacturer's product, their warranties are going to be void. Okay, simple as that. Now, the biggest gain in exhaust manifold or header technology is actually with internal coatings. So again, the outside, most of your tempered metal is going to turn that gray after it's gone through the heat cycles, get a little bit of red tint to it, that rust look naturally. Stainless steel is not going to discolor to the same aspect as the steel, but you're going to get some of the blues and reds and purples added into the very hot spots within the material. But now you can look at manufacturers like Eastwood. They have internal exhaust manifold coatings. That's actually applied, like the product says, to the inside. Normally through a pressurized spraying type system. There's others that you can actually just soak it to the inside and allow it to drain out at the exit point. So you're adding a thin barrier to the inside of the tubing. Now that keeps the heat inside of the exhaust system moving at a faster rate of speed. The higher the temperatures within the exhaust, the faster they will actually exit the exhaust system. Not enough that you're going to see a performance gain necessarily on a dyno or within a running chassis. Okay, it's going to be much more dependent on the ambient air temperature and other things that are within the mechanical systems. Now, most of your jet hot coating headers out there using mild steel will actually dip the entire header system into a vat of the coating and pull it out. So it's going to be coating on the inside and outside of the metal. Now in this instance, the interior coating is retaining the heat inside of the open area of the exhaust. The outside coating is to make it more resistant to things like rust or oils that might be dripped onto it and give it that more glossy look for a performance show type thing. But even with that coating, if your skin comes in contact with that or any of the mechanical or electrical components underneath your hood, it will burn. Okay, it is more chemical resistant and it's going to retain its color a little bit more. But the performance gain still doesn't show with any kind of testing. It's the appeal point of view. Now, if you're working with a chrome or a ceramic coated exhaust system, you can still utilize either one or all three of the exhaust type wraps. to save your hands or components of the engine that might come in contact with them. It's that simple. In every case, in every single case, whether it's the blanket or the Kevlar or carbon fiber wraps, the original manufacturer warranty will be void. Okay, that is just taking the responsibility from the manufacturer from any component that could be applied to it. It's that simple. There's obviously advantages to each. What we have noticed, we're using the internal coatings is the best retention to actual heat with inside of the exhaust tubing itself. It will not discolor or cherry the exterior of the exhaust piping until extreme temperatures have been reached. By adding the coating outside, that discoloration is extended even further into the RPM or into the temperature range. Chrome actually has a lower discoloration temperature than the ceramic coatings. For any of you that understand ceramic whatsoever, you realize the melting point or the heat temperature range of ceramic is much higher than the nickel chrome materials used in our products. So yes, jet hot coatings, powder coatings, they will give that additional visual and chemical resistance to the exhaust system. The wraps are an additional layer of material or product to enhance whatever circumstance you're in. All of them will void the warranty. Now, for the price that you put into it and the amount of time that it takes to do it in the proper wrapping is uncomfortable. Okay, I will be honest with you, especially with the Kevlar and the carbon fibers. Most of the kits supply some kind of a glove so that when you're wrapping the material on, you're not getting the small fibers in your hands or on your arms. Use them. Okay, it's no different than working with rollout insulation in a construction site. The more you work with it, the hotter or sweatier you are, the more those fibers get in your skin and the more you're going to itch. Okay. Now, once the material, especially the Kevlar, goes through the heat cycles, those fibers will start to tighten up to the point where the loose fibers that can be rubbed off on your skin will start to shed. And you can wash the header wraps. Same with the coatings. You can wash them when at room temperature. The Kevlars will retain the paint if you decide to color the exhaust header wrap to whatever color you desire. You can wash it and it will retain it. The carbon fiber will release paint or any of the oils that might be dripped onto them. Okay, so it's all dependent on your personal preference, your individual circumstance, and what you're trying to achieve. Now, it's been common practice throughout the years that when you start talking about the exhaust system, the old practice was to actually paint your exhaust system from your collector to your mid pipe, and then go through your RPM cycle, allow it to get hot, and then at that point you look at where the paint is actually burned off your exhaust system. You realize that the exhaust temperatures have reduced at that amount within the exhaust system to where you can put your H pipe or your X pipe or exhaust muffler at that point, and you're not going to necessarily be imposing on the power production of the exhaust system. By then, the exhaust gases have slowed down just naturally within the exhaust design. By adding any kind of resistance after that point of where the paint has evaporated from the exhaust system, you're not going to affect the performance whatsoever. With exhaust wrap, you can extend that distance a little bit more, or through the exhaust coatings or the material of the exhaust itself. Whether it's a mild steel to a stainless steel. Stainless steel will retain the heat further within the chassis. By adding an exhaust wrap to even a stainless steel system, you can stretch that heat point within the exhaust system to be further back in exhaust, meaning the exhaust gases themselves will travel faster over a greater distance within the exhaust system. Now, most of you that have a hot rod realize that the amount of heat that's radiated into the engine or driver's compartment is drastic. By adding the wrap, you can reduce the amount of heat that's released from the exhaust within that first portion. Once your exhaust gases have cooled down, you can open it up to regular ambient air temperatures, and it's not going to necessarily affect the temperature of the exhaust gases themselves. So whether it be along your fuel lines of the inside of the frame or chassis of the car, to the starter and electrical components, to the automatic transmissions, the steering components underneath the hood or within the engine compartment itself, to the firewall electronics, computer controls, fuel systems, they all can be protected by actually wrapping your exhaust system for 3/4 of the length of the vehicle. At that point, it's just about the ability to do maintenance on the car without having to drop down a larger section of the exhaust, so on and so forth. So, just to get things straight, the exhaust wraps do not necessarily add to the performance of the engine. Exhaust coatings do add additional performance to the engine. Exhaust coatings are more visually appealing, whether it be chrome or ceramic coating, but the exhaust wraps can be colored to whatever color you determine to be, perfect for your setup. Exhaust wraps, depending on the material it's made out of, may collect or hold on to any of the chemicals that are spilled on them. The ceramic coatings will shed those chemicals. They will burn off or drip off and easily be cleaned. Chrome is not necessarily a performance coating. It is entirely for the visual aspect and resistance to the atmospheric chemicals or moistures that might be out there. Resistance to rust. But normally inside the pipe, once it is chromed and has gone through heat cycles, the chrome will actually remove itself from the interior coatings. Ceramic coatings will stay there much longer and create more performance within a package. So, again, when individuals start talking about wrap, people just immediately come out and say, "Oh, it's going to avoid your warranty. It's going to cause your exhaust to crack." If you are starting out with an extremely budget-friendly exhaust header system, say from Hooker or Cookers, MagnaFlow, any of the cheaper mild steel builds, and you wrap them, yes, they have a tendency to crack at extremely high temperatures. If you're reaching those temperatures, you need to be spending a little bit more for a quality exhaust system. That does not mean you have to take it to an extent to get stainless steel and put all the different coatings on there. But realize the performance level of your engine and match the exhaust to it. The wraps are more for your ability to work under the car, or get your hands into the engine compartment, or to reduce the underhood temperatures within the car, or within the driver's compartment and the exhaust system next to components like the fuel lines. Ceramic coatings you normally only find on the actual primary tubing of the exhaust system. Rarely will you see coatings applied to the rest of the exhaust system from the mid pipe to the tailpipe. At that measure, you can also use the wraps, again, to make it more appealing and safer, so on and so forth. Now, the price difference between the three different wraps, exhaust wraps, is going to be all over the place, depending on where you get it. The Kevlar is normally the cheapest. Okay. The blanketed type normally is not sold in large quantities to where it's for the entire exhaust system. It's more to wrap the actual components next to the exhaust system, or just the portion of the exhaust system near the actual component, like the starter or transmission. The volcanic or carbon fiber exhaust wrap can be utilized across the board with every component. It just has the drawback to not being able to be colored necessarily by paint. You can buy the carbon fiber in black, red, or yellow through DEI or the previous Dale Earnhardt Industries. They did sell the header wraps. So if you're working with an exposed exhaust system, whether it be on a Harley Davidson, motorcycle, so on and so forth, you can pick within a very short color spectrum of your exhaust wrap. The Kevlars, you can paint it whatever color you want, and the Kevlar will accept the color. The blankets are actually aluminum, so they're not going to accept most of your paints, or after flexing or after time of heat cycles, it will shed the paint. So yes, this is the longest video on exhaust wraps or exhaust temperature control applications. Realize that all of them void the warranty, but I have yet to run across where any component, whether it's the exhaust manifold, cast iron manifold, to tubular exhaust systems, whether it be mild steel or stainless steel, I have yet to see one crack because of the wrap. Now, cast iron manifolds will naturally crack because of heat cycles, extreme heat cycles, to the point where they're glowing red. When they cool down, or the faster they cool down, the more tendency they are going to be to crack. Or the older the material and how many rust cycles or exposures it's gone through will add to cracking. The cheaper Coker or header, Headman headers with an exhaust wrap, I have not seen any of them crack. They will eventually, over time, retain the condensation that might be in the ambient air and trap it between the exhaust wrap and the virgin material. But it's immediately burned off if you are starting the car and going through heat cycles with a daily driver. If you have a vehicle that is sitting over the winter months, especially if you're from the Rust Belt of the United States, if you wash your exhaust system, making sure you bring it to operating temperature to the point where the condensation has been able to evaporate, you can park it throughout the rest of the year and it will resist anything from rusting. If you're parking something outside in the winter months, or driving your vehicle in winter months, maybe a four-wheel drive truck, so on and so forth, I do not recommend using the exhaust wraps, because the snow, the condensation in the air will be trapped inside of there at every time the engine is allowed to cool down. It'll be like a sponge. It'll soak it in. So again, knowing the condition of where you're going to be using your project, and how much you're going to be using and how you're going to be storing it is going to be more vindictive of what material you actually use within your exhaust system. Again, if you're using Harleys or something that's a seasonal piece of equipment, as long as you allow it to get hot before putting it away for the seasonal time, it will last a long time. Okay. Any of you, close the video out with this, any of you pure stockers, okay, so whether you're using the factory cast iron manifolds for either a street car or a race car, the exhaust wraps are more intentionally made for you being able to do maintenance on your vehicle, whether it be changing spark plugs or protect the spark plugs from making contact with the exhaust, and to reduce underhood temperatures. That's it. There isn't necessarily any kind of performance gain within horsepower or torque, so on and so forth, or better fuel economy. It just doesn't make that much of a difference. Now, along with that, the exact same coatings or wraps that can be put on gasoline engines can also be utilized on diesel equipment. So your turbo, diesels, and so on and so forth, the exhaust systems will take advantage of the exact same thing. It's more for protecting underhood exterior temperatures than the actual performance that is occurring inside of the pipe. That's it, folks. So hopefully that helps you choose the right product and situation that you're in. If you're going to do things right from the very get-go, that's kind of the motto, do things right or don't do them at all. Most of your exhaust systems are going to take advantage of the ceramic coatings, not the chromings, the ceramic coatings that you can buy and apply yourself in addition to the exhaust wraps. So yes, it's more expensive. It's still not going to be expensive as a fully custom set of stainless steel exhaust headers or manifolds. But for nearly the same cost, you're getting all the benefits of the radiant heat protection to other components, the chemical resistance, and the color, if that's what you're looking for. So with that, hopefully that helped out. Have a good one.